What is going on, Colts Nation, and welcome back to another episode of Bring the Juice, your guys, Cody and Derek, back with another episode, guys. And hey, we didn't forget about the defense. We already did a part of our series looking at the offense, breaking down every single position group. And we figured right before training camp, we better get to the defense and get into the special teams, talk about every single other position that we haven't talked about quite yet. And today's topic we are going to be discussing is the defensive line. So just to clarify, if you guys are like, what does that all mean? Defensive end, interior defensive line, we're going to talk about everybody. So it might be a little bit of a meatier episode because there's a lot more players that we can talk about. So let's get into it. Let's start on the outside, Derek. The Colts, in my mind, have four guys that I feel really good about on that defensive end position. They have, obviously, guys from last year, Tyquan Lewis. They have Kwity Paye and Dayo Odeyingbo, both who were rookies last year that we feel like are going to take steps up. They obviously traded for Yannick Ngakoue as well. Give me your thoughts on these four defensive linemen and anybody else maybe in that room that we're not talking about as well.
I think this is probably the most confident in a defensive end group that I've seen from Indianapolis in like 5 years. It's been a long time since I've seen a very high potential group in something like this. Kwity Paye, you start out with, he's came on to the end of the year and did very well. And he is obviously learning a lot more over this offseason and what he gets from training camp, learning from guys like Yannick Ngakoue and other defensive line coaches that he's now going to have to deal with, and playing alongside some of these other guys as well. He's going to learn a lot more this year because he's going to be soaking it in a lot more now, more of the detail rather than just him being a rookie from last year. He's going to soak in a lot more of that detail this year because he knows what's coming around. So obviously Kwity Paye, a huge name to watch out for, taking a big leap. Yannick Ngakoue, like you mentioned, hoping for him to be that stud edge rusher that the Colts have been desperately searching for, to be able to provide a giant uplift in pass rush production from their defensive line group. Yannick Ngakoue, ever since he's come into the league, has been a force to be reckoned with. You've obviously posted it several times about how efficient Yannick Ngakoue has been since coming into the league. So there's no question this guy definitely has a gear to him and still in his prime. I mean, it's amazing that we got him. So that's very fantastic to look at. And then when you look at the depth pieces that you for sure know you're going to have at the edge, Tyquan Lewis, we mentioned it several times over the offseason. Chris Ballard stating how important Tyquan Lewis has been to this defensive line because he went from a guy that was potentially going to be cut from the roster due to injuries and a lack of what seemed to be a lack of will to play at times. And then taking Chris Ballard's words to heart, saying, this is your last chance to prove to me that you have something to prove here and that you want to be on this team. And then goes out and has been, was the best player in training camp that year, comes back in 2020 with a vengeance, has 4 sacks. And then 2021 was a great role player before he obviously blew his knee out in the Tennessee game. So what you're seeing from Tyquan Lewis is an improved player, somebody who believes they have found their role as a backup flex defensive lineman that you feel confident in putting in a bunch of different schemes, right? Because he's athletic enough to play on the outside, but confident enough to be able to perform stunts to the inside, right? And then you have a guy in Dayo Odeyingbo who basically has that position flexibility as well. Didn't play much in his first year due to that injury that he sustained in college. And with just due to the fact that he didn't have a lot of time to get in football shape. He didn't have a lot of time to get on the field and practice things at 100% the way he wished he could. This time around, things are going to be a lot different. Last year was soaking it up mentally. This year, he's going to start soaking it up physically. This is where you see that huge jump in production from a guy like Dayo Odeyingbo. I know you posted just 2 days ago talking about the NFL needs to watch out for DeForest Buckner and Dayo Odeyingbo on the inside. You got two 6'6", 6'7" guys with 34.5-inch or longer arms. I mean, that is just insane seeing the size that you have from Dio Dangbo and DeForest Buckner. And then you're talking about Kwity Paye and Yannick being able to bring that speed and that pressure off the edge. That this defensive end group definitely has a lot of high potential.
Yeah, and I do wonder, and we'll talk about this with the other defensive linemen too, but like I do wonder, like some of these guys who showed flashes, like with the change at guard, at defensive, defensive coordinator, defensive line, all those things. Does it allow them to maybe step it up another level? Even guys like Tyquan Lewis, who despite a really not a great coach in Brian Baker, we can all say that. The fact that he was still able to do what he was able to do, and I mean, I think was the best defensive end the Colts had until he got injured in that Tennessee game. I do wonder how much that's going to help them make another leap here, in 2022. So that's interesting. Couple other names here on the defensive end position, because I think the Colts are going to keep 5 or 6 guys here probably, because they have a couple guys in the interior I think they're going to keep as well. Key guys. There's a couple guys to choose from to kind of think who could potentially round out this roster. Obviously, we know Ben Banogu, former second-round pick, up to this point, a draft bust for the Colts. They brought in Ifedi Odenigbo. Sorry, I completely butchered that. I know I did. They have a guy like Cameron Klein. They brought in Brian Cox. They have a few guys here that have some experience, or have been in the league a couple of years, I should say, for some guys. What are your thoughts on a few of these role players at defensive end potentially?
Yeah, it's ultimately going to be a matter of who fits really into the Leo position. That's really going to be the deciding factor here on who's that athletic defensive end that's going to be able to have a few mismatches here and there with some of those backup offensive linemen that later on in the season, when injuries start piling up, somebody that can take a few snaps away from somebody like a Yannick Ngakoue who is able to get some rest, right? And your answer always comes back to Ben Banogu because of how athletic he is and how athletic he was coming out of college. Just ultimately, you and I have said it several times, and it has been discussed constantly through the Indianapolis media, that we just don't know if Ben Banogu actually wants to play. That's the big question here. He was a healthy scratch for the entire year last year and just ultimately didn't really look like he wanted to play, because at the end of the day, the coaches kept saying it's all about him at practice. It's about him not doing the right things and him not showing the effort that we need on the defense to be able to get those snaps. That shows a lack of commitment, and we haven't seen him show any kind of commitment since his rookie year. So does it leave room for guys like Odenigbo and Brian Cox to be able to come in and maybe provide that if they can get some kind of benefit in that? It leaves the door open for possibility, because if Ben Banogu has something similar to an epiphany like what Tyquan Lewis had after his second year in the league, then it's no doubt that Ben Banogu would end up rounding out the rest of this defensive end roster.
I'll say with Odenigbo, he's a guy that actually has some production to back his name. A couple years ago, 2019, he actually had 7 sacks, which, that's more than anybody else, in that backup defensive line room. So I think he's probably my early favorite to potentially round out the number 5 position there. But yeah, Ben Banogu clearly, when you talk about the Leo position, he clearly is, from a physical standpoint, the perfect fit, but like you said, there's a lot more going on up here that needs to be addressed, that's not physical. So he's got to figure it out. We talk about players with last chances. This is like his 3rd last chance. Like if he doesn't make it here, I don't know if there's really hope for him in his career with the NFL, honestly, because if he can't even beat out, some of these backup guys, then we've got some issues. So we'll see. Hopefully he does. Obviously, we are rooting for him. Hopefully he's had a mindset change and he can really come out this season and maybe provide some quality minutes behind Yannick. So we'll see. All right, let's move now into the interior a little bit. So defensive tackle for the Colts, they have a couple guys. Obviously, we know the 2 starters, DeForest Buckner and Grover Stewart as well. And guys like Dio Dangbo and a few others can be a little position flexible. But we're just going to talk about guys that maybe are more defensive tackles, since we already, did mention him. So DeForest Buckner, Grover Stewart, those are your two starters. Just talk to me real quick about these two guys.
I mean, what more can you say about DeForest Buckner, right? I mean, does the job on both ends. Great run defender and a guy that can get an occasional pass rush on the quarterback because he's the guy that's going to demand the double teams. It's crazy when you got a defensive tackle that demands double teams. That guy's the best guy on your defensive line, and he's respected around the league for offenses to game plan around making sure that guy does not get one-on-one opportunities with your offensive lineman. Because that almost every single time he gets one of those, he's going to win that rep. So at the end of the day, DeForest Buckner, he speaks for himself. Everybody knows his presence and what he provides. Grover Stewart, again, a great run defender for Indianapolis. Honestly, just gets overlooked all the time when it comes to the rest of this defensive line, because when you look at from the standpoint of Grover Stewart as a pass rusher, you don't see a lot of that. That's kind of been more of the back end of his game. He's continued to improve in that aspect, and every single year of his career, he has continuously gotten better and better at what he does, because not only has he learned from his mistakes, he's gotten in better physical shape, he's gotten stronger, he's gotten faster, he's learned how to play the game more efficiently. So, do we see a potential where Grover Stewart might get a few more sacks this year? It could be interesting, because again, the teams are going to be looking on the edges now a lot more with Yannick Ngakoue and Kwity Paye. And of course, DeForest Buckner is going to demand more of the attention on the other side. So if Grover Stewart can take advantage of a few more of those reps, use that strength. The only problem that you have with a Grover Stewart is the ability to have a plethora of pass rush moves, like swim moves or rips or things like that. It's not really a Grover Stewart thing, right? He uses more of his strength, his raw strength and power and speed to be able to knock you off your block, right? That's the Grover Stewart thing. And unfortunately, Grover Stewart obviously does it very well. And it's especially evident in the run game, because being able to take on double teams the way he does is impressive. But when you're doing a one-on-one mano-a-mano in the pass rush game, if you're not somebody like an Aaron Donald who has amazing strength grid for his size, then a lot of times the bull rush move just doesn't work a lot of times. So that's been the one thing that's held Grover Stewart back a little bit. But who knows? Maybe this offseason, he develops a little bit more of a pass rush plethora of weapons to be able to use. And maybe that works for him. Different techniques to be able to bring those things in. I hope he does, because if he does, that front four is going to be super scary. Even if it's on first down, you have to take into account every single one of these guys now.
Absolutely. A couple other guys here that'll back him up. You got the two rookies, obviously Curtis Brooks and Eric Johnson, that you brought in as well. You have a couple names like Chris Williams. You have RJ McIntosh. And like I mentioned earlier, like guys like Dio Adangbo can play on the inside as well. First off, how many guys do you see the Colts potentially keeping in the interior specifically? And who do you think those players will be?
It's going to be very interesting, because it's going to depend on whether or not they want to have 9 or 10 guys on the defensive line to come in. I think they had 9 last year, if I'm not mistaken.
I think it was.
I think they like to keep 5 ends and 4 guys in the middle. So, and especially since you and I just talked about it, with Taekwon's ability to occasionally come inside, Dio's obvious size ability to be able to come inside, there is opportunities for them to, not bring as many defensive tackles, because you have a few ends who can play that defensive tackle position. So you want to bring some more ends in for depth purposes. But when it comes to the overall guys, Eric Johnson has been talked about a lot. He plays the game the way the Colts want their defensive tackles to do it. with raw power and strength, and he just shoots the gap at a high speed and blows plays up. And he has, and honestly, I mean, his ability to shed blocks is so much better than guys like Grover Stewart and Chris Williams in that fact. He's not only fast, but I mean, he definitely has a great technique to get off of blocks. So that could be something that really gets him involved. And ultimately, it's going to come down to Chris Williams and Curtis Brooks, rounding out the position. Obviously, Chris Williams has been in the league for a little while. He's been with the Colts for a few years now. So you wonder if that position knowledge will definitely get him to stay that way, or if Curtis Brooks somehow comes in and matches that intensity that we saw at Cincinnati, where he was one of the most productive defensive tackles in all of college football, and will come in and be able to do the same thing. Because Curtis Brooks, while undersized, has a relentless motor and just never gives up on plays.
Yep. I mean, yeah, Curtis Brooks, we talked about it already, so we don't want to rehash it, but was very productive in college. So I think he definitely could slide right into that, 3 technique role. Just he maybe could move around a little bit too, because he's a little slightly undersized, so maybe he can play some end as well. We'll see on that, but I certainly think that he has definitely the talent and the ability to definitely, be a key contributor, be one of those key backups there. And be a good guy in the interior that can get after the passer, which the Colts really need as well, outside of, DeForest Buckner, obviously. So, yeah, I think that'll really do it for this defensive line room. I think we can all say this room, while it went through a lot of transition this offseason, we definitely feel like, as opposed to where it was last year, this room has a lot more potential and has a lot more upside. It has a lot of guys that are now, entering into year 2, or, entering into this new system, some guys that we think still can get better for sure. And it has a proven veteran guy in Yannick Ngakoue as well. So overall, I think this is a really good group. I'm really excited to see how they come together. And ultimately, when training camp hits here next week, to see which guys really start to stand out. I mean, we can always guess, throw darts at a dartboard, but when the pads get on, we'll see. That's when we tell. So really excited for that. And guys, let us know your thoughts on this defensive line room. Do you think it's as good as we think it could be? Who are kind of your, breakout guys? Let us know all these things. Who do you think ultimately makes the final 53 man out of this group? Do you think the Colts keep 8, 9, 10 guys? Let us know in the comments below. That'll do it for this one, guys. Thank you so much for all your support. And as always, guys, go Colts.